Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar on Visualization Workflow with Building Design Suite 2015. My name is Dhanjeet Sah and I'm working as BIM consultant with Cadgroup Australia. Today's agenda for this webinar would be with the following topics: visualization tools of Building Design Suite. I'll be talking about visualization enhancements in Revit 2015, as well as talking about Building Design Suite workflows that is available with the software products like AutoCAD, AutoCAD Architecture, and Revit. And after talking on these topics, I'll be showing a live demo on Suite workflow from Revit, bringing the model back to Showcase and 3ds Max design. Now this is a slide. I'm using to talk about what the visualization tools are available for Building Design Suite. The first products I'll be talking about is Revit. This is for in-process visualizations that enables you to capture design in a near photorealistic state within Revit. The next product I'll be talking about would be Showcase, that we can use to easily transfer AutoCAD design or Revit models into compelling imaginary movies and interactive presentation. Using this tool, we can communicate the design with an immersive, interactive environment and with storytelling features. The next product I'll be talking about is AutoCAD 3ds Max design, and that can be used for cinematic, animation, and near photorealism software that provides architects, engineers, and visualization, especially with sophisticated 3D visualization tools that can be used with the actual BIM workflow with push-button features within the software. In fact, we can get some more rapid iteration of design, daylight analysis with high impact visual and animation. The next slide, I'm referring back to Building Design Suite 2015. The reason why I bring this slide is just to highlight, because there are some of the product owners of Building Design Suite and they may not be using it, or they may not be installing some of the software which are available for the product. Especially, I can talk about there are basically 3 different editions of Building Design Suite called Building Design Suite Standard. That's the DWG based technology. So there are a variety of AutoCAD software shipped with this edition. The next is Building Design Suite Premium, and that is where there is a software Showcase, and as a BIM-based software we have Revit and 3ds Max design. The top list for edition of Building Design Suite Premium is Building Design Suite Ultimate, where we have some other software, professional software for structural analysis called Robot Structural Analysis. They have Inventor, as well as they have InfraWorks 2015. So this slide I'm talking about is, I'm going to refer to some of the visualization enhancement with Revit 2015. There are a few of the new additions with Revit in visualization as a tool, where we can create a hand-drawn or non-near photorealistic content inside Revit projects. There are features like sketchy lines, which can easily be created within Revit. There are some improvements with anti-aliasing, and there is a new features included within 2015 is called interactive ray trace in the viewport, which enables designers to get near photorealistic content within the viewport. I'm sorry about there's a bit delay in the slide, so it might be a slightly delay in some of the because of the internet connection. Okay, so I'll be continuing with one of the slides here, which is showing how to bring AutoCAD or AutoCAD architecture model back to Showcase. In order to bring AutoCAD or AutoCAD architecture model in Showcase, there is an easy way to click on File Access menu that we can clearly see in the application with capital A, and use the feature called Switch Workflow. And once we click on that, basically we can check this setting before going to export the model. The same instance can be applied to bring this model back, let's say, to the Showcase, as well as the same menu can be used to bring AutoCAD or architecture model back to 3ds Max. So this is one of the slides I'm referring to bringing AutoCAD or AutoCAD architecture model back to Showcase. And there's a push button basically to do these kind of presentations. Later on the live demo, basically I'll be using a software Revit to bring model to Showcase or to 3ds Max. So now I'm going to talk about how to bring, or I can show some of the live demonstration bringing Revit model to Showcase. So as I said, in AutoCAD, the similar feature we have inside Revit to click on File Access menu, which is with capital R, and we can choose one of the presets, and they got some of the settings we can change before exporting the model. That will launch the application Showcase and will bring the Revit model inside the Showcase. So in the demonstration, I'm going to show some of the features of the Showcase. The first would be live materials. The next would be environment. Next would be visual styles, and finally also talk about something called design alteration. So I'm going to launch Revit, and I can show you how easily we can bring the model inside Showcase. And using the same model, I will be bringing to 3ds Max for lighting analysis or high impact visualization. Now, this is one of the Revit model, and I'm going to use a switch workflow from so I'm clicking on the File Access menu, going to the button Suite Workflow, and here we can find some of the presets that I could see is if we intend to bring this model, let's say using to use inside 3ds Max, we can use the preset 3ds Max design, or if I'm going to use Showcase, we can use one of these selection from. So I'm going to use one of these presets here called Showcase Realistic Presentation, and this is going to basically having one of the settings they're asking. So if we click on setting, we have a couple of settings we can change before bringing model to the showcase. They have a couple of settings we could change based on like what the environment should be, what will happen if the model is larger than this particular percentage, using for large scale environment, or what will be the ground level. So we have selected Ask User, where if our model is elevated to some RLR value, we could basically change this when we're going to export to Showcase. They have an easy push button called Create Walkthrough Zone for interactive walkthrough that we could take, so that in Showcase they will create a basic walkthrough on their own. That also can be customized as the requirement. Now once we change or preset, use this setting, we can hit and run, and that's going to launch Showcase with the model. So I'm going to basically using Showcase, opening the Showcase and getting this model. Generally, if I'm using a Revit model and using the run function, what will happen is it's going to take maybe 2 to 3 minutes to convert this model, because it's a different formats, and Showcase might take a bit while. So I have already exported the model back to Showcase, and we're going to use this model as a base to show you some of the features. So this will be the model from the Showcase. Now we could see there are a couple of features I'll be talking about within Showcase. Is first of all called Live Materials. Now I'm going to press a keyboard shortcut called M to get the material roll out. I'm going to select, let's say, one of the object, and there is a function in right-click menu called All Objects with this material. So this is how I can make the selection easier and say if I need to change materials, we can change in a fly. So I have selected the objects with the same material in this scene, and say if I need to change with different materials, we can simply use one of these existing materials in the scene, or we can use from the material library. Now in the material library inside Showcase, there is Showcase predefined material with something called Showcase materials, and they have something called Showcase extended materials, which is extended from especially for Autodesk software. As well, they have another library called Autodesk material, which is the similar library as Revit or AutoCAD, and that is the reason why when we use Suite Workflow, it translates all the materials, lighting information, environment, 100% as from the design software to the Showcase. Now I'm going to select one of the paint material if I need to change from existing library. I could use one of the wall paint, let's say matte finish, and I will just select whichever the color I would prefer to apply, and we can change the materials in single click. In fact, we can select any of the elements, and the advantage of using Showcase is once we select these elements, they got a nice animated feature, so we can see which object is selected, and we can change the material on fly. If we are happy with any of the materials changes, we can look for another feature called environment. Now, this environment is imported from Revit, which is a gradient at this moment. And if we need to change the environment, we can easily change using some of the push buttons. So I'm enabling environment menu with Showcase, pressing E on the keyboard. And here we have got the options. For example, if I need to change some of the lighting information, I would use a adjust lighting features, which can easily change the mood of the presentation. For example, if I need to change the lighting direction, I would hit on light, and I will start moving to the cursor in the environment to see how the lighting is going to affect my design. In fact, we can choose the shadow feature to change the shadow location. If I need to change, or if I'm required to change the material back again, I'm quickly going to select one of these elements, use the same feature, all objects with material, and let's say I want to go back to my previous material. So I will go back to material, look for the materials, what was assigned. Now, I could start playing with the environment back again. So I'm going to environment rollout, and I can select one of the existing environment is available in the scene, or I can use some of the exterior environment which is baked with the software. So I'm going to use one of these desert down road, which is one of the environments. So I'm enabling it. Once we enable the environment, we could easily change the properties of environment, where we could see some of the features there is using the lighting image contribution, so I can make much brighter or slightly more darker. Using directional light contribution to the scene, I can change some of the setting there, and in fact we can rotate the lighting and the background to match with as per my requirement, the lighting position. If I'm happy with this setting or presets, we could use this as a different design alteration, which I'll be showing in a couple of minutes. The next feature is to quickly change visual style of the design. So I'm pressing V on the keyboard, and I can simply select some of the pre-defined visual styles. So I can simply click on a visual style called realistic with no shadows, and there won't be shadows in the scene. Now let me quickly change back my environment back to gradient, and I'm going back to visual style, and I can use one of the presets to change, either to have shadows or using with ambient shadows, or we can use another feature like using as an ambient shadow with edges. I'm quickly changing back to called tone color. This gives a bit of as a cartoon type of visualization. or we can use one of the features, something called ray tracing. Now this is one of the best part of Showcase, that the ray tracing can be enabled directly in the viewport, which gives a very near photorealistic rendering within the viewports, and that is interactive. That means I can enable the visual style ray trace and can change the materials, and I can see the immediate updates directly in the viewports, which would be difficult to use with some other softwares, because we have to re-render the scene to get refractions, or the correct shadows in the outputs. So this is one of the best part of Showcase. I'm quickly going back to smooth shadows and ambient shadows, because it's taking a bit of RAM compared to ray tracing, because ray tracing start using your hardware acceleration, which is from the graphics card. So I'm changing back to shadows and ambient shadows. Now I'll be talking about one of the features called design alteration. So I'm quickly closing the visual style and going to something called design alteration. In this particular file, I have already created a couple of these different design alternatives that can be used to communicate directly with the stakeholders or with the customers. One of the example I have created here is having 5 different alternatives with the different materials. So I have one of the alternative using just a gray or grayscale kind of look for the model. The next alternative I have created using a couple of different materials, which was a default. And I can see I have created another, something called alternative 2, alternative 3, and there is no limit to create alternative for the same file or same project, I would say, that saves within a single file. Now just going back to main color and say I need to create another alternative, so I want to change a little bit of material of these yellow materials, so we need to create different variants. So what we could do is basically select all objects with this particular material. Now I could go and change the materials. So I'm using another paint material for wall, and I could select all of these objects and say add to next alternative, and this is how the Showcase will preserve all the settings of materials or the visibility within this let's say preset. So now I have flexibility to have one alternative which will be just a grayscale, and another alternative using a different material. So in overall, I could say it's a great way to tell the story on few clicks, and it can be very interactive with the customer or in front of the customers using this particular software. Now I'm going back to the presentation, which would be using, I'll be talking about the next features of the suite workflow. So this is one of the finished model from Revit to Showcase 2015. And we have seen so far how quickly we can change the materials, change the environment, visual styles, and we can quickly create design alternatives in few clicks. Next, I'm talking about how to bring Revit model to 3ds Max design. There are 3 things I'll be highlighting is using how to use suite workflow. I'm going to demonstrate how we can quickly use this model for the lighting analysis and how we can use the same model to create a high quality visualization. This is one of the slides that shows how much light is being dropped on the floor using a daylight analysis tool. So now I am going to open 3ds Max or Revit and see how we can bring the model back. We can bring model from Revit to 3ds Max. So inside Revit, I have a view created something called light analysis, and this is one of the interior scene created with a camera from Revit, and we can use this similar way of suite workflow to bring model to 3ds Max. So I'm going to click on File Access menu, Suite Workflow, and we could see there are two kind of presets called 3ds Max Design Exterior Rendering and 3ds Max Design Interior Rendering. The point to be noted before going to export is a best way to minimize the objects exported for 3ds Max or to make the materials much realistic. The settings within Revit can be done prior to export. That means we would prefer to have a realistic materials or a physically accurate materials for the design in Revit, and FEX is the technology that will be converting model from Revit to 3ds Max that carry out all the information, which would be geometry plus light information, environments, and the materials. And there is 100% translation, so that means within 3ds Max you have more time to do for lighting analysis or for creating animations rather than fixing the materials and lights from the beginning. So I'm going to use 3ds Max Interior Design Rendering Suite Workflow, and we can change some of the settings prior to export. I'm just checking the options, like I'm going to export the lighting plus daylight system plus camera as well, so that I will have the same view or similar view from Revit back to 3ds Max. And we could just hit on button called Run, that is going to fire 3ds Max and open this model into 3ds Max. It might take 20 to 30 seconds or a minute or two, depends on how complex your scene is. I'm going to cancel for a while just to speed up, or we can see before canceling, yes, it has exported the model, and we can see how quick it was to get this model in 3ds Max. And in this software we could see the material translation is done, and that's 100% similar. I can prove this way by selecting one of the materials. So for example, if I'm selecting a element and look for the properties, we have used one of the material, something called roof, and will be same thing with this. When we translate this material, if I'm going to extract the materials from this particular element, we could see if the same material has been imported to 3ds Max. And the advantage of using this suite workflow is it's a linked model. So if there is some changes, if I have to do, either I can do within 3ds Max environment or go back to the design software, which is Revit, change the models, and we can simply update inside 3ds Max using File Link Manager. So I'm going to quickly demonstrate how I can use this model to get a lighting analysis or daylight analysis within the environment. Now, the lighting analysis tool is has been validated by National Research Council Canada, and that is the same organization which validate radiance simulation. And the same tool is been validated for LEED 8.1 certification as well. I'm going to change now. I'm going to demonstrate how we can use the lighting analysis tool to get how much light will be in the environment in a particular room. I'm going to change the camera called 3D view light analysis, and we could see is the same view that was created with Revit. In this particular in this particular room, I'm going to use one of the tools called Lighting Analysis Assistant, and this is the tool where we have a couple of tabs there to understand if there is any problem or if there is any setting. We can do everything from one single tool. So this is one of the tabs called General, where I could see I could see if there is any problem. That will be a bold letter. But so far there is not much any of the problems there. One thing we have to understand is there are different tabs, for example, called lighting, and they are going to show me the sun and the sky 002. That is the lighting imported from Revit, and if we have to change, we can soon change within the scene. The time I'm looking at is 12 p.m. Let's say quickly if I have to change the setting for sun or sky, we can change within 3ds Max. So I'm going to select the sun in 3ds Max and going to modify panel, and I can see the sun position I could use with three different settings, which is going to be either manual, date and time location, or using weather data file. I'm going to use something called weather data file, which will be much more accurate information. And I could click on setup. I'm going to load weather data file. This is one of the weather data file I have downloaded from Energy Plus, and this is based on New South Wales, Sydney. And if you are not aware of weather data file, then more information can be found on www.energyplus.com. Now I'm going to open that weather data file, and that gives me some of the setting we could choose from. So I'm going to change the time period. I can exactly change the, let's say, the month or etc. So I'm going to use for this demonstration, let's say June 21, and say the hours I'm going to use is, let's say, around 9 a.m. And using this particular function, basically it has changed my sun position accurately, physically accurate. One more thing we have to take note of for the light analysis is whenever we are using the daylight must be mental ray sun and mental ray sky. And there is a sky model we have to change back to either Fairways all weather or CIE. Since I'm using a weather data file, I prefer to use CIE model and use as a overcast sky. Now, I could also change some other parameters as required. So one thing we have to take note of is we have to disable this called aerial perspective as well. Now, once it's been done, I can just hit on updated status, and that will report me what is the time, what is the latitude, longitude, and the date and time in the lighting analysis tool. Now, we have to also consider talking about the materials, and I could see there is total objects with invalid materials is 0. That means my scene is validated with a correct material in this scene. If there would have any problems with material, they would say 10 materials, 10 found or something that has to be addressed to before analysis has to be performed. There is a guideline of all of these on one of the Autodesk website. I'll be happy to send the link after the seminar if you want to know more about this particular tool. So I'm going to use another tab called Analysis Output and going to create something called Light Meter in the scene. So I'm going to hit on Create Light Meter, and I can use a feature called Auto Grid inside 3ds Max and going to use approximately placing this light meter up to this much of area. This can be get more accurate, or we can change the length and width later on. So I'm going to slightly change my width as well as for the length, and going to change the segments to be more. So I'm going to change to 10 by 10 so that I will have more grids. Changing more grids will have option to have more values on the particular grid lines. And it is recommended also to raise that 30 inches from the ground or from the floor or from the ground level, depends on where I'm using that. So I'm going to change this to 187 for now. So it's elevated 30 inches from the floor area. Now once my light meter is done, the next is a single push button called Calculate All Light Meters Now, and wait for the simulation to be finished. So this is hardly, it's going to take less than a minute. And we'll come back with this particular report. So in this particular example, we could see there is this much of lumen value is coming from the daylight system in this environment, and the value I'm looking at is 15811780, and depends on the area. And there is a simple setting to change the color scheme as a linear. So I'm going to say the maximum I'm going to change back to is, let's say, 2000 lux, and the lowest I could see the lux in the environment having 0, that is the end of this room. So this gives me an idea that there's supposed to be more opening, or the more opening has to be added in that area to get a desired amount of light. So reasonably, there isn't always a looking at the charts how much lux you require for a particular environment. So, for example, for living room would be 300 to 450 lux you need, or for the warehouse you need at least 250 lux in that particular area. So this gives me an idea of the lighting analysis, and if the modification has to be required, we could go back to Revit. We will fix the problem or add extra openings, and we can save model and come back to 3ds Max, and we have something called File Link Manager, which basically has it's a linked FBX model. We can simply just say reload, and that will update my design within 3ds Max. Now, the same model, as I said, can be used for the visualization. So I may not be in position to show within 10 minutes a fantastic visualization, because as we all know, it's a time-consuming thing. But I will quickly open my slide and show you a couple of different let's say visualization done with 3ds Max. This is one of the examples of rendering done with 3ds Max using mental ray. There's another slide. This is also using a simple daylight system within Max, which is one of the interior scene as well as one of the exterior scene. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about something called Autodesk 360 rendering, and this feature is available with AutoCAD and Revit. So I believe most of you are aware of this called cloud rendering. Now they named as Autodesk 360 rendering. With that's a fantastic features for users. It is instead of waiting for hours on rendering on the desktop, you could send the Revit or AutoCAD model to Autodesk cloud systems that can render your design in a couple of minutes, and you can work simultaneously in design. So these two pictures is one of the examples of Revit model rendered on cloud and sent back to the users. If you have any questions about cloud rendering or related topics, we'll be happy to answer you. So I would end my presentation over here, and I'll look forward for any of the questions you may having. So please feel free to ask me any of the questions you may have with this related with this presentation. So I'm just waiting for any of the questions you may have having. As I said, you could type the question, or you could unmute your telephone and can ask me straight away. Okay, I've got one of the questions here. Let me have a look. Sorry, having trouble a little bit with my question here. I will have a look now. Okay, I've got a question. Do you prefer to use 360 rendering or 3ds Max rendering? That's a good question. I would answer this way. If I have got luxury to spend much time on the desktop, yes, I would prefer to use 3ds Max rendering because you have lots of control on the rendering setup. Whereas in cloud, there is a minimum setup for the rendering. So I believe it's one to another way is the advantage or disadvantage of cloud rendering is you have a minimum setup. You would say the quality would be either going to be the best or medium or fine or draft. So that's the preset. Whereas in 3ds Max, I can tweak as much as I can. So there is definitely rendering. There's a different rendering technology within 3ds Max. Is you can use either Mental Ray, or you can say I want to use a third party like a V-Ray rendering engine, or let's say I might want to use iRay, which is a nice feature now in 3ds Max, which basically where you are getting the time or fixing the time for rendering rather than waiting for computer to process. That means we can say, okay, I want to spend 5 minutes time now, get me the result as much as you can, and that's how they can produce your rendering within the time-based frame. Okay, so I believe, yeah, that was only one question so far I had. If any more questions, I will still wait for a minute or two. Okay, I've got another question from one of the user is how long it takes to render in Showcase? Well, that's really interesting question. From Revit point of view or 3ds Max point of view, we all understand it's time consuming to get rendered. And in Showcase, we have seen there is an interactive rendering. That means we are not going to push button say render and wait for till this gets rendered. So there is a visual style inbuilt within the software where you can change to, we have seen called ray trace, and that start immediately rendering within the viewport. And depending on the time we want to spend, because they have got level settings, we will say, okay, I need a 10 iteration with ray tracing, and that might finish and we can just export that as a different images, or we can create a still sort to get image saved with Showcase. So I would say you're not spending a lot of time in rendering rather than just having an interactive rendering within the viewport. Okay, so I've got another question here. Do you recommend a set of tutorials for the reading and general 3ds Max tools? That's a one of the good questions. Yes, definitely there are wide resources available for 3ds Max. I've been training 3ds Max from last 15 years, and from different sort of backgrounds or different sort of industry the people are coming from, and realizes most of them, they have the similar questions like how long it's going to take to learn 3ds Max, or what is the best tutorials. The answer would be for me is we do also provide training on 3ds Max, as well as there are quite a number of resources available on the internet, and one of the best resources you would find on the YouTube channel called Autodesk channel. Please search for that, and you'll get a very large number of tutorials or the video tutorials according to the software. So I have seen quite a number of basic tutorials as well as quite a number of tips and tricks on 3ds Max. There is another URL you would be interested is area, so AREA, area.autodesk.com. So that will be another resources to look at for setup tutorials. Okay, so I have got another question about could I please have a link to the source of the EPW files? Not a problem. I would definitely have taken your name, so please do not worry. I will send the URL to download this EPW file for sure in a couple of hours. Okay, it looks like, yep, there's no more questions. So thank you everyone again, and hopefully we'll be in touch in the future. I will have another webinar scheduled soon. We'll be on in-depth with materials with Revit. So we'll be sending you the invites in a couple of days. Thank you, everyone. And before I'm going to drop the phone, I would also wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and have a great holidays. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.